Okay, we're going to take a look at my Geo Metro keys here. I got this car at auction like 3 months ago. It came with this black key. I've always had trouble with the ignition, have to jiggle it to get it to go. Hatchback, same thing, kind of have to put the key in and pull it out a little bit and wiggle it and all this kind of stuff. The doors were even worse, they were pretty much useless. I couldn't even get the doors to relock with the key. I was lucky if I could get them to unlock. Usually just the passenger side, the driver's side wouldn't work at all. I suspected it was because of a worn or poorly cut key or wrong master. I was right. I took this apart, cleaned it all out, used a Dremel tool on some parts inside, cleaned it all out, got all the old lubricant and grease and junk out of there, and had a locksmith cut me a new key, which works a lot better now. It also works in the ignition and the hatchback now without having to jiggle it around and stuff. So, what I'm going to show you is how to get this apart and what it is we're trying to do here. Inside the door handle, if you open up the inner door panel, you're going to see your door handle. And in the handle on the 89 and 94s, you're going to find this cylinder plugged in there with a little clip. And you pull the clip off and this entire assembly will come out. And it'll come out, if this is the outside of the car, it'll come out towards the inside of the car once you take the clip out. Now, when I'm working on this, I keep a key in here when I can. That's so that when I pull all this apart, all the tumblers and springs won't just pop out. So as long as the key is in the cylinder when you're moving it out, that'll help keep all the parts in place. So the only thing that keeps this thing from coming apart right now is we've got to get the circlip off here and this lock mechanism. And then we're going to take off this round silver collar here. And that's where we're going to get into parts flying all over the place we have to watch out for. So some of the things we have to watch out for is we have a spring and a latch inside this collar right here. Usually it's so gunked up you have to kind of pull it out, but there'll be two pieces there you want to watch out for. Of course, all 8 tumblers and springs, which as long as the key is inserted they can't come out, they've got to be taken apart and reassembled in the exact same order they're in. The springs don't matter, but the tumblers do. And so you got 2 parts here you need to watch out for, 8 small parts here we need to watch out for. And as we extract this lock out, once we take it apart, there is a tiny ball bearing, and I mean tiny, and a tiny spring, which the ball bearing more than likely is going to fall out. The spring is so gunked up you probably have to pull it out. You don't really need to pull that out usually to clean it, but if you don't, you're going to lose it as you manipulate and play with this lock trying to clean it. So, first thing we need to do is to take the circlip off the back of here. And I'm so prepared to do this, I need to look around and find a tool. Let me see here. Got this and this, and this, tweezers, pliers, a fork. You'll need a fork. And my tiny flathead screwdriver. Where did I stick that at? Perhaps I can get along without it. Let's try it with just these. So the first thing I need to do is to get this little circlip off of here, and it'll just pop off. I got some tweezers here, so let's try them. I have to look up and make sure I'm still in frame. You will want a clean work area, and I would advise if you're doing this, do it on the floor, because then as you drop things they can't fall off the desk and onto the floor and bounce around. So taking the circlip off, set that aside. Okay. Then this will just come off. Set that aside. At this point, we need to get this round silver collar off. It has 2 small indentions here and on the other side. This one hasn't been punched back on because I've already had it apart, but I'll tell you the easiest way to get this apart is to use a fork. It's a perfect service tool. And just work it up in here, and you'll see that there's a teeny tiny dent right here. And all you've got to do is kind of pry up on it a little bit. The first time you take it off, it'll be hard to get off because of dirt, gunk, and corrosion. But if you keep prying up on this and then start working it forward, it'll pop off. So we're going to take the key out. What we want to make sure of is that the entire lock assembly doesn't come out, all of this. We just want the silver thing off. So we're going to do it kind of slow and make sure that the only thing coming off is the outer cylinder. This inner plate shouldn't come off, and it has a couple of tangs to hold it in there, so unless they're broke off or really loose, we shouldn't have any problem taking the outer piece off and not having any of this fly apart. So let's sit here and pry on this with my fork service tool, spin it around, pry the other side. You can see it's moving up, and I've had this one off, so it's going to come off fairly easy, but they're not really that hard to get off. Okay, so we've popped this off, and it's just a round silver little doodad. Let me pull this up so we can see all the other parts come off. Now, this is where our first parts are going to fly off. When we take off this silver piece, this silver cover here has two tangs on the side that don't really need to be bent, it just needs to be popped off. And if yours doesn't come off real easy, maybe you need to prep on this a little bit, but more than likely what you want to do is hold your finger in front of it so it doesn't just fly off, and just give a little bit underneath of it with some kind of service tool. Now here's where our first part's going to start flying out, so we want to watch for them. As we pull this off, okay, and that comes off, there's a little latch that's already flown apart here. It's this piece here. Okay, let me get my tweezers and I'll hold it up here. Okay, this little piece is a little door. Now this is the little door that when you push your key in, it opens up and lets the key in, and then it closes. So it's really to keep junk out of the lock. Okay, so we want to keep that. And the flipping motion of that is by a little tiny spring. Okay, it's located right here. It's very, very tiny little double spring. Okay, so we don't want to lose those two pieces. As small as they are, they aren't the smallest pieces that we got to watch out for. Now I'm going to take all this stuff and get it out of the picture so that we unclutter this thing here. Okay, now we're down to where little tiny pieces are going to start to fall out. Now what we want to do is take a key and shove it in here. That's going to keep our lock from falling apart when we take it out. The tumblers, the 8 tumblers and 8 springs, can't come out as long as that key's inserted. The inner tumbler cylinder is going to come out along with this piece where the clip was, so we're going to push here to get it out. Now, there's a tiny, if we look at the back here, we can see that there's a small slit in the top of the cylinder. On the opposite side, if you look in there, you're going to see a little round silver, unless it's really dirty, ball bearing right there. That's the part you're going to lose if you're not careful. So what we want to do is take that ball bearing side of the cylinder and lay it down here and push the cylinder out, take it out very slowly, and we want to find that ball bearing. Now more than likely it's still right there. Okay, well if we don't take that out of there, we're going to lose it. So there it goes. And let me show you how small this ball bearing is. Okay, here's the tweezers, which are not really big tweezers. And can we see it? There's the ball bearing. Very, very tiny. Okay, so you need to set that aside somewhere really safe. Plastic bag it. There is also underneath of that, in the hole that it came out of, a teeny tiny spring, which more than likely does not want to come out because it's got dirt and gunk in it. Well, you're going to clean this up in here, so you don't want that to lose that. So either somehow secure that hole so the spring can't come out, and or else get the spring out somehow. But like I said, this one doesn't want to come out, which is good. I'm going to leave it in there, and do something to keep that, hole covered up, or ensure that that spring doesn't come out while you're doing all your cleaning and stuff. Now I would use, you're going to find this one's already cleaned. I'd use something that will take out gunk and whatever. You know what I actually used on these to clean them was the engine cleaner. Okay, gunk engine cleaner. You figure if you can clean an engine, it'll clean this stuff here. So I soaked them in there for a couple minutes, cleaned them out, and then I inspected the lock when it goes in here. The tumblers are going to stick into these two grooves and prevent it from turning, and when you put your key in, it retracts them so that it can turn. You'll find a bunch of little raised edges and stuff. And so I tried to run through there with a little piece of sandpaper and just take the edges out. And don't sand it a whole lot, but just get it cleaned out. So let's set that somewhere so I don't lose my spring. This part is the part you're really going to have to clean up good. And I'll tell you what I did was, as long as you have this key in here, you can't lose your parts. The minute we take this key out, we're in danger of losing up to 8 tiny little pieces of metal and 8 really, really tiny springs. Okay? Now, what happens is, let's see if we can see this here. You can see some of the tumblers really aren't sitting down all the way with this key. This key didn't work very well at all. That's why I took it to a locksmith after I cleaned it. And you can see that some of the tumblers, or little tumblers, are sticking up. They should all be down because the key's inserted. So let's see what happens if I take this key out while holding onto these so they don't fly out. let's put the key in that he made me. So let's see if there's any difference. See, the tumblers are down a lot more consistently and uniform now. This key was either worn out or really poorly cut, and that's why I had so much trouble with my locks even after I cleaned them. So let's look at it again when I take the good key out, which is nice and tight because it hasn't even been used yet. I put the original key in. See this tumbler sticking up? They're going to catch in those little grooves that we're going to clean inside of here. Okay? So, even after I cleaned it, the key was still the problem. It wasn't the gunk. So what this has, it actually has 2 pins up on the outer side and slightly raised one there, and then one on this side somewhere. Let me see. Oh, right here, second from the front, was sticking up way too much. So let's stick the real key back in here. Okay, and right now it's safe. Nothing can fly apart. Okay, and I'm already getting some junk and stuff, even though it's clean. Getting all kinds of crap down here already. So let's see. Let me get the new cleaner paper towel before I go any further with this. Get rid of this one and make sure that none of that's parts. No, lots of metal and lots of dirt. Okay, now this is where you got to watch what you're doing. You'll notice that on the one side of the cylinders there's a hole here, and on the other side there's not. So when we disassemble this, we're going to take the ones with the hole and put them in a row on the left hand side and the ones without the hole on the right hand side. That way we make sure we get them all back where they're supposed to be. The springs do not matter, they're all the same size, but these pins have got to go back where they came from or you're going to have a lot of problems. So let's pull the key out. And on this clean lock, they're going to try and just fly out. On your dirty corroded lock, you're going to have to pull them out with pliers. Okay? So we'll take this one out. Let me go that side and just hold the whole thing right here. Wiggle it, a spring came out. Springs on that one. Let's see if I got all these in frame here. Hold on. I'm going to do this kind of backwards. And this one. Okay, so I've got one spring there, and 2 springs are still inside the cylinder. So let's get them out. Okay, so we've got, these are very, very tiny springs too. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and again, all of these came out of the side of the lock with the little hole right there. These don't have the hole, so we're going to put these over here so we know where they go. And again, starting from the same side of the lock where the key goes. The spring fell out. Spring fell out. Spring didn't fall out. Spring didn't fall out. So we need 2 more springs. You see, one of them flew way over here because I barely tapped it. Almost lost that one. It flew almost a foot. So you got to be really careful with these because you're going to have a big problem if you lose any of that stuff. Now, after you get all that out, that's when I took this thing out and I put some of that engine cleaner on it. And stuck it in here, and it's that foaming engine cleaner, and I had to just foam it out of here. And I did that like twice. And then I took a straight edge razor blade and I broke it lengthwise in half and took the side of the razor with the actual blade on it, which doesn't matter. I only took that because the side without the razor blade won't fit in here. And I ran that down, scraping the sides of all of these little slits. Okay, because there was some corrosion and buildup in there. And so I just went scrape, 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 and used it sort of like a piece of sandpaper just to get some of the gunk out of there. Then I ran the engine cleaner through it again, washed it out, set it aside. These were totally gunked up right here. Okay, these are all your tumblers. And what I did with these to get them this clean, and I hope I just put that back where I picked it up, was to use not a steel or stainless steel, but a brass brush for a Dremel tool. Okay, and I would just hold them with my needle nose and lightly go over them just to get the crud off of them. They appear to have maybe a copperish golden type coating on them. At least they did when I cleaned them off. I was afraid I might be taking something off, but they don't appear now in this light to be missing any type of coating. And I haven't put anything on them for lubricant, graphite oil, anything like that. So after you've done all that, and the springs I kind of put in something to clean them off a little bit, but what you don't want to do is put them all together in a bucket or a little tub and clean them off and then roll them around or something, because these springs will all spring and wind into each other. You will have a hell of a time getting them all apart. Okay, because you'll even think you've lost one, because when two of these combine, they look like just one little spring. So let's take and put this thing back together now. This is the side with the hole in it. We're going to do the ones down here, exact reverse order of what we did, so we'll spin to the side without the hole in it. And I happen to have a magnifying thing here, and I'm going to use it to put this back together, because this is so small it's almost impossible to see these little tiny holes. So the first thing I'm going to do is put all the springs in. 1, 2, 3. I could be using my, I'll probably have to. I can't even pick this one up. Let's use some tweezers. You wouldn't believe how small these little springs are. They're about as small as that ball bearing was. Oh, drop that one and fly away. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's right here. Almost lost it. It's like working on. I'm gonna give that up because it's just gonna fly off somewhere. Because I'm going to squeeze it so hard with the tweezers that when it does fly off, it really goes. Okay, so we got all the springs in there. We need to take all of these tumblers and put them back in the same order they came out in. Now they go back in, that little hook goes on top of the spring. So that's how they go back together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now before you go put the other side in, you can test these and see if they're right. Hold on to them. Take a good key, insert it, and they should all be down and flush. If you've got any that are up, and they weren't up before, you've put them in wrong. Let's even try it and see what happens. Let's reverse these last two purposely. Put them in the wrong little slots and see what happens. Put our key in. Yep, now we've got a problem because one of these isn't seated, see it? And if you jiggled it and messed with it, it might open because it's pulling it down a little bit, but it's wrong. So we've got our lock put back together wrong. That's why you really want to look at these before you take it apart and make sure they're all retracting so you don't get yourself confused and think you put some stuff back together wrong. Because with all the gunk and junk in there, you could have a badly cut key like I have, clean it out, put it together, and then it actually worse than when it was dirty, because it had all that gunk in there kind of helping it to jump over the ramps and stuff. The little grooves and landings. And when you cleaned it up, it'll actually work it'll operate even worse. So now we got to put the other side in, but we got to make sure these nice clean ones that want to fall out of here don't fall out. So I'm going to hold them with my middle finger, twist it up like this, and put the little springs in. One, 2, 3. These 8 little springs and that little spring with the ball bearing are probably the easiest to lose parts. The other parts are probably big enough. Let me make sure I put this back together right. 1, 2, 3, 4. And check and make sure they're all bouncing in and out nice. Now I'm going to hold them down, insert my good key, and see. Remember, as long as the key's in there, they can't pop out. So now we can, kind of like a safety on a gun, we can take a look at it and make sure they're all retracting good. Okay. Now I'm going to hold on to them. I'm going to put my known bad key back in there so I can get this out. It's because I'm pushing down on it so hard, it's hard to get the key out. Okay. This is my old bad key that came with the car. See those sticking up there? And when I took two locks out and compared them, I could tell the same pins were sticking up in the air, so I knew it was the key. I was having a uniform problem on all of them. Now, what we got to do is we've got to get this back into the lock cylinder. Okay, so we've got our little piece with our spring we don't want to lose. Now I'm going to use my magnifying glass, and yep, the spring's still in there. But I've got to get this teeny tiny little ball bearing in there. So this is a little hard to do. I mean, it is so small that I've just dropped it. Where the hell is it? That or it's stuck into my thumb. See, it's pretty easy to lose this thing. It rolled over here between the tweezers and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and drop it in here like this. Okay? And then I'm going to play that game where you had the BBs and you had to get them out of the hole. I'm going to take and I'm going to roll this thing around until I see it drop in that little hole. And then hope it stays there. And it did. I don't know if we can get this in here or not because of the shadows. I'm trying to see what you all are seeing. Can we see the ball bearing? Sitting in a tiny hole in the back of the lock. Okay, so this is where you've got to be kind of careful and figure out what you're going to do here. So what we need to do now is try to stick this lock in here. This lock is keyed a certain way. There's a, if you look at the end, you're going to see that there is, if I can find it, this little tang sticking out up here. Right here's this little ridge sticking out. Watch as I turn the lock, it goes away. See that ridge? That ridge has to go into this grooved area of the lock right here. Okay, that's what gives it the stops to limit how far it turns. So that's on the bottom, this is on the top. I need to spin this around like this. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and start to insert it in the lock, into the cylinder, and I've got to watch my little ball bearing in the back and see what's going to happen with it. If the ball bearing's sticking up too high, you may have to stick something really, really tiny in there and push down on the spring-loaded ball bearing. See, the ball bearing came out. And I lucked out and it went back in there. So we've got to get that ball bearing pushed down with something as I push this in. Let's see, what do I have here? You know, I'm going to use that little trap door that was on the front of the lock. It's really, really small, so I'm going to take and I'm going to use that and I'm going to try and push that down. It didn't work. Let's try it again. The heck was that? I just heard something fall. Hopefully it wasn't anything of mine. I must have hit it with my arm. It's just one of the pieces. Alright, here's my ball bearing. Let's get it back in here. I'm probably got to pull down my magnifying thing to see what I'm doing here. Tilt the camera up a little bit. Where am I? Over here. Okay. And it rolls away. What this does is, this is the détente for your lock, and this is a car door lock. Where'd my ball bearing go? There it is. This is probably the hardest part of putting this thing back together right. And when you turn your key to lock and unlock, the key centers. This is the ball bearing that centers that lock so that you can take your key out. And without it, you're going to have to mess with your key, centering it manually every time you unlock or lock your doors. So you kind of want this. So let's see if I can do this again. Did it work? Yes, and I can see my ball bearing is in there. So now we want to make sure this thing doesn't fall back out, because if it falls back out while we're sitting here messing around, we're going to lose our ball bearing. So what we need to do is secure this. So we will take and put the latch assembly back on. Now the latch assembly goes with the bent portion going over the lock, not away from it. So it's not like this. It's like this. So we take and spin this on. Okay. Now we need to put our C-clip on here. Maybe that's what fell. Maybe it's one of the many pieces that fell. Because my paper towel moved. Actually, you know what I did? I knocked my entire paper towel off and I lost all my little parts. Fortunately, they're big little parts except for that tiny spring I'm going to be searching for to finish this video. Okay. Make sure this is seated all the way on here. Appears to be, we'll make sure. Okay. Now, at this point, we're safe. The lock can't fly apart anymore. Okay. And as I turn it, I've got a noticeable click when I come back on the ball bearing. And because of the ball bearing, it actually jumps it right into the daytime position. So that little ball bearing is really important. You don't want to lose that. But at this point, we're safe to pull our key out. Don't need it anymore. We've got to put our little door cover, and ring back on. But I've got to find the spring I lost, which is the little teeny tiny double spring. Fortunately, I swept my floor before I started all this stuff, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. But you're going to have to wait a second. I love it. Here it is. Good thing I swept the floor. I never would have found this in all the dirt that was down there earlier. Okay, this one's a little tricky to get back together because it's a spring. When you look inside here, you're going to see that you've already got a little bit of a door here that's welded in or molded in as part of the key. The other trap door that actually moves goes on the opposite side. There's two small, see if I can get up in here a little bit. I see. Okay, now you can see the monitor. You can see two small little places here. This is where the spring goes. And the door goes this way. And I'm going to show you how to put this in here. See if I can get the spring up here so you can see it. So we're going to set the spring in here, and there is a right way and wrong way for the spring to set in here. Okay, the spring is just setting down inside those two little grooves. It needs to be with this leg right here on this side of the lock, not this side of the spring. Okay, and then this is the tricky part. This door has to go up on the spring and start compressing the spring. And if I can get it in frame so you can see it as I do it. Oh, and there's also a wear spot on this door, so you gotta make sure you put the wear spot against the spring if you're putting it back together exactly the same way. And this is all spring loaded now, so I gotta watch what I do. But see if you can see that. Okay, it's closed. It wants to fly apart. So the tricky thing to do here is to get something. I was using my screwdriver earlier that I can't find now. Let's see if I can use this key and do it. Alright, to hold that down, because what I've got to do is I've got to get this on there. So I'm going to take this and get it started. It's got these big legs on each side, and hopefully everything will stay together as I put it together. Okay, now we've got our little trap door in place, spring loaded. This is on here. And see what happens when we put our key in. Little trap door closes back up. And before I mess with it much more, because this little thing's barely on here, it's wanting to fly off, and I don't want to lose anything, I'm going to take our little collar And this has a hole on one side, so it goes a certain way. There's a hole here in the lock, so we'll simply put it over that. Line up our little tangs. Looks good. Squeeze it on there. At this point it's fairly secure. What we need to do is take and ding these little dimples back down that we pried up with the fork. They just need to tap, bend them down a little bit. But at this point the lock's fairly secure, so let's try to see if it works. Let me get a good key too. Yep, and it's snapping back into place like we want. And it's working without error. This lock never worked this good before. Mostly because it's clean, but especially because it's got the right key in it. This is the wrong key. This is the key that came with the lock. And as you can see, it doesn't work. But if you turn and pull a little bit at a time, there you go, now it works. Okay, this is how my locks have been working. And then when you try to go the other way, see, this key, properly cut key, clean lock, magic, done.